Hello, my name is Fritz KO, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Fritz KO Vids. If you like this video, here's what you can do to help spread the message. Like it and share it on YouTube, Facebook, and other social media. Show this video to your friends and family. Connect with me, Fritz KO, on Facebook and help start an information revolution. And again, as always, thank you for watching.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
I think the people watching tonight should look at the people protesting and look at what color hat they're wearing. It's certainly not red.
But as you can see, she was wearing red. As we continued the interview, Kiara Robles paid for it.
Are you surprised, ma'am?
In a free country, with free speech, in this iconic place, no matter what a person's politics, that happened.
This is why people who don't necessarily even support Donald Trump are saying, you know what? I've baked in the lies. I've baked in the lies. I know. I got it. But the journalists now are like saying, well, two can play that game.
It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen. It's fake news. Fake news. Fake news.
Since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are
is
attacking
terrible.
our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give
is
us a chance
terrible.
to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state, Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you state categorically,
She's asking a question. Don't
Mr.
be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you give us a question?
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
Bye. Go home to mommy. Go home to mommy. Tell her to tuck you in bed.
This is where, when it comes to journalists, one of the things they're supposed to do is make sure that the sources are correct, that there are people who can corroborate evidence. And yet we had accuser after accuser coming out trying to ruin not just this man's credibility, but the whole process of trying to nominate a judge to the Supreme Court. So journalists, we should hold them to a higher standard. And fortunately, I think people saw through this story.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about Jim Acosta. And I think a lot of people saw this, the exchange with President Trump. This was when he had a press conference with reporters the day after the midterms. Take a look at this.
I think you should let me run the country. You run CNN. Right. And if you did it well, your ratings
Let me ask you, if I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President,
that's enough.
Ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President,
that's enough.
I mean, this was seen all over and sparked so much criticism, Beverly.
Yeah, what you saw with Jim Acosta, he's really the one who is the leader in this, but it's somebody who's trying to be a celebrity journalist with the whole goal of trying to get under the president's skin. Not only is he not asking questions, but he's actually making accusations and then debating the president. And in this situation alone, he tried to push away a woman who was trying to take the microphone away from them. I think, though, at the end of the day, Jim Acosta is getting what he wants because I think it's all about attention to him. And we are talking about him this morning, so perhaps we're giving him something that he wants.
Okay, so let's give some attention to the Boston Globe right now and a correction that they had to make. And this was about Elizabeth Warren and the mathematical chances that she was Native American. And let's go ahead and read this correction. And it says, quote, due to a math error, a story about Elizabeth Warren misstated the ancestry percentage of a potential 6th to 10th generation relative. The generational range based on the ancestor that the report identified suggests she's between 1/64th and 1/1024th Native American. I mean, come on, like these numbers, really?
And yet they didn't even make a correction to their original statement saying that these numbers pointed to strong evidence that she did have Native American heritage. So I think what you saw with the Globe, they seem to be in Elizabeth Warren's camp. Perhaps they want her to run in 2020. But I think most people saw through this and wonder if the Globe's journalistic integrity is as questioning as it comes down to her indigenous ancestry.
Yeah, Beverly Hallberg, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Have a good New Year.
Thank you.
Listening to you and watching you, I know you are a Trumpster.
No, I'm agnostic. I am literally agnostic.
No,
I'm
don't
not.
tell me this.
I'm not a Trumpster. I'm really not.
Do not tell me this.
It's true. Because
how can you not be a Trumpster?
Because I don't. Because history is too complicated for me. when I saw him coming on, I did a bunch of shows on HLN. And I was confused. I wasn't horrified. I was just like, what are you guys seeing? What is this you think you're doing here? And I think what I heard was, we're sending in a little dynamite.
That's right.
And I'm all for that. I'm all for that. I just don't know if he's the right guy or not. I just don't know. I know that my favorite president was a maniac, Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, I thought you meant Obama.
No, I liked Obama too. I voted him in. But I like.
Don't tell me that either.
I did.
Okay, go ahead.
I worry about them trying to kick somebody out of office. I think it's terribly destabilizing to our country. Yeah. That's a mistake. But is this the right guy or the wrong guy? He scares me sometimes, but maybe that's what we need right now to do that. I don't know. I just don't know.
Take my word.
Well,
he's the right guy.
Well, is he going to stay in there?
Yes.
Okay.
They can't handle him.
See, you know what's funny? I look for people to make me feel better because it's very upsetting. The whole thing is upsetting. He's upsetting. You know what I mean? And that's what people are reacting to.
Yeah. When Trump first announced that he was running, and he said, "I'm going to build a big, beautiful wall around the borders. I'm going to bring back jobs. I'm going to get rid of these restrictions. I'm going to protect you." I said right then, yes, there is a God. And I knew he would become president. And I've been on Cloud 9. I went to Cloud 9, and I've been dancing on the ceiling ever since.
Well, I'm
glad. What a feeling.
I'm good. I've learned to trust you, so I'm going to go with your sort of feeling about it. I am agnostic. I'm agnostic because I'm way in the middle on everything. I get upset about stuff that hurts people. I'm upset about the homeless thing. Really upset about that.
I don't get upset about anything. I just see injustice.
Well, remember I told you I'm too emotional.
Yeah, right? I got to help you.
So I really get...
Call me later. Okay. My final and last question. Did you have fun?
I did. I did. And it's everything I thought I would get. I got something from you, a lot.
Amazing.
Yeah, a lot.
Thank you so much for that.
Whole idea of freedom of speech, and this conversation is very important to me, and I'm glad to have you on to talk about it. So what started out as a neo-Nazi murder in Charlottesville and the president's failure to denounce Nazi and white supremacists exploded into a discussion in this country about the removal of Confederate statues. Have we gotten away from the point of what happened in Charlottesville, what it was really about?
And it seems to me we clearly have, and I think that was the point of the alt-right and the white supremacists seizing on an issue that they know that there's actually broad public consensus on not moving a lot of these statues. There's a Quinnipiac poll that came out today showing that 50 to 39 Americans aren't big on the idea of moving all these statues out. So they seized on an issue that they think is a winning issue for them and then tried to broaden out their appeal that way. And I think a lot of folks on the left fell for it. They want to have this discussion anyway, and so they saw the opportunity to have this discussion. But it seems like a misdirection from what actually happened in Charlottesville. The issue in Charlottesville is white supremacy, not whether some people think that statues should come down or stay up, because clearly 50% of the American population doesn't want to keep these statues up just because they're a bunch of white supremacist racists.
Did liberals get played by President Trump?
I think pretty clearly they definitely fell for what was, whether he plans it or not, a trap for the left. I mean, he said, you guys don't have a limiting principle. You're going to go after statues of George Washington or Christopher Columbus or Thomas Jefferson. And now you're seeing that actually happen on the left. The most obvious stupid case is this banning of this reporter from ESPN named Robert Lee, an Asian guy, from covering an event at University of Virginia. You know, the political correctness of the left is actually driving people into Trump's arms, even though Trump's initial response to Charlottesville and then his Tuesday response to Charlottesville was entirely wrong. I think that one thing that Trump has had, he's just benefited from the fact that the left is constantly reacting to everything he says with an enormous level of passion, and I think that that's actually a negative. Even what he did last night insofar as going after the media, because the media reacted instead of doing objective analysis of where he was not telling the truth, they jumped to extraordinary critiques of his mental health and talking about how he was crazy and how he was morally bereft and all this stuff. All that does is it plays to his crowd. His crowd thinks that the media is out to get him. His crowd thinks that the media have a particular emotional animus for him personally. And so anything that the media do is going to exacerbate that.
Well, two things. And by the way, just because ESPN, I want to get it correct. ESPN has responded, and they were saying they didn't ban the guy's name is Robert.
Yeah, they moved
Lee.
him off of it.
They didn't ban him. They asked him if he wanted to, and he picked something that was closer to his family. They said that they didn't ban him, and they were looking out for his own interest.
They're trying to take away our culture. They're trying to take away our history. And our weak leaders, they do it overnight.
The media is simply responding to people who are there protesting and to the story of the statues being taken down. The media hasn't called for the statues to be taken down. So I don't understand when he says the media is trying to take away your culture. What is...
Well, I mean, I do think that one of the conservative critiques of the media, and this has been true for as long as I've been alive and probably before that, is that the media have an agenda, a political agenda, and they hide behind this patina of objectivity in order to press forward this political agenda. You know, Don, you were very passionate about President Trump's statements about the media last night, and I think some of that was justified, but I think a lot of it actually goes to what his base thinks, which is they think that you have an animus particularly for President Trump, that you have an animus for his agenda on things like Confederate statues. I think you personally probably want to see these Confederate statues come down. I mean, is that true? I mean, I would assume you do.
Listen, I lived in the South for a long time, and to tell you the truth, I knew the statues were there. I was offended by the statues. Whether they should come down, I would leave it up to the individuals. But I do think that they are insulting to people, just as you would you want to see a statue of Hitler as a Jewish
No, I totally
person,
understand
right?
your point of view. The
would
point
you want
is
to
that
go
you have
to,
a point
which
of view,
I made
right?
earlier, would you want to go to, and listen, we shouldn't pretend that there's this fake objectivity. Everyone has a point of view. It doesn't mean that you're biased. And so, but just to get people to understand, as a Jewish person, you would not want to go to a Hitler high school. Well, that same effect, African Americans, that has the same effect. Robert E. Lee has the same effect on African Americans. And so, and also the Confederate flag. And so I think we have to be understanding of each other. It's not that I don't like the president or I have an agenda against the president. I'm simply speaking the truth as I see it.
Okay, so and I totally understand that, but what he's saying and what his people are hearing is he's saying essentially that you do have an agenda in terms of what you think, promulgating what you think about Confederate statues. You have a clear point of view on that. That's a perfectly acceptable and I think understandable point of view, but the implication is that you are an objective reporter who's actually propagating a point of view, whatever that point of view may be. I mean, you just said openly that you don't think that your point of view is biased, but your point of view clearly is biased.
But
I mean,
what I said about the president last night coming out of his speech had nothing to do with statues. I was talking about his behavior on stage, so that had nothing to do with that. Yeah.
Again, totally understood, but the way that it read is that you have a personal animus toward the president, and that's the way he wants to play it. So whether that's true or not, that's the way that a lot of his followers are going to take it.
I only have a personal animus towards ignorance when people don't know their history, whether that's the President of the United States, a guest on this show, or someone I speak to on the street. I think if you're going to be able to, you need to be able to defend yourself. And in order to defend yourself, in order to have a right, clear perspective, you need to know history and you need to be educated about it. And in many ways, I think people who are fighting for these issues are not. And that means the people who want to take the statues down and some of them who do not want to take the statues down as well.
Because the great unifier is jobs, wages go up, economic prosperity, 3% growth.
I want to get Ben.
He's going to get elected again.
Ben, go ahead, please.
Well, I mean, I think that what you saw in his rally last night was that President Trump is great at two things: the art of opposition and trolling. And that's basically what that rally was last night. So he's really good at finding something that all Republicans dislike, which is the media, right? The media, we don't like CNN, we don't like MSNBC. This is just true of conservatives. And so he takes that and he says, okay, unify around this. You can't unify around my policy. You may find me kind of weird. You may not like McConnell. You may not like Ryan. But we all dislike the media, so we can do that together. And then he says some things that are funny. I thought the elite's comment was funny. Says some things that are outrageous, like people in the media aren't patriotic, knowing that people in the media are immediately going to turn it up to 12 on the Richter scale.
But Ben, don't you think he should be truthful in his comments, even if he's funny, and if you give him that, shouldn't he be truthful? And he wasn't.
Of course, and I think that this is where the media. Here's my advice to people in the media. My advice is turn down the emotion down to 1 and turn the fact checking up to 10, because I think what's happened here is that the amount of fact checking that's gone on has taken second place to the offense that people in the media are taking at his words. And I think that the problem is the American people have to know that what the media are trying to do is defend them from untruth, not defend themselves from insults. And until the media start making that distinction, a lot of people on Trump's side are going to think that this is just a rock'em sock'em robots between Trump and the media. They may not like either one, but they find it kind of amusing.
As many well know, it's pretty much impossible to have a real conversation with fanatical liberals and anti-whites. Those who think Trump is literally National Socialist Hitler, or that conservatives torture illegal, non-white children in cages. They are so far gone in crazy town.
Let me read this because it's actually a pretty good promo, kind of. So she says, Peterson's YouTube content contains a torrent of anti-black, anti-gay, and misogynist hate. In July 2018, he announced it was White History Month, saying, "Happy White History Month, white folks. This is your country. Thank you. I appreciate it."
This woman is a liberal and she's Jewish. This is why I try to tell people that there's good and bad in all culture.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. You have children of the lie, coming from all races. And then you have children of the truth coming from all races. So it's a waste of time to be hating somebody.
Right.
Just be on the side of good and tell the truth. That's all it takes.
Well, that's protesters protesting President Trump's refugee ban. They did it so at airports across America, causing some people to miss their flights. Thousands turned out from coast to coast. We're joined now by a leader of one of those protests, Cameron Whitten. He's in Oregon. He's on the organizing committee of Portland's Resistance, an anti-Trump group. Cameron, thanks for joining us. In case you didn't read it, here's a part that you might agree with. I thought of you when I read this, actually. And here's what his first executive order on the refugees says. The United States should not admit those who engage in acts of bigotry or hatred, those who oppress Americans of any race, gender, or sexual orientation. Do you agree with that?
So I'm curious about how that relates to the 7 countries that was put on the travel, immigration, refugee ban that's currently in place.
What are the,
it just seems that if you're going to take... you're asking which of the 7 countries?
Yeah, what are the 7 countries?
Oh, you've got like Iran, Iraq. I can't list off all of them, but it lists off 7 countries. Right. There's 5 others. I believe that Turkey's probably on it. Syria's on it. Okay, well, Syria's on it. There's
they're
a lot of countries.
They're not our country. They're different countries. But here's the point.
But you have countries like Saudi Arabia is not on it. There's a lot of countries that Trump has had business interest in that we've seen not on them. So there's questions about how did you get on that list or not.
I'm trying to get through this here. So I want to get back to this quote, though. This is from, I'm not making this up. I promise this is real. What do you think of that? So basically the executive order says, you should make sure before people come here that they're not going to be committing acts of discrimination when they get here.
How about people who've already gotten green cards or have worked for the government? So I'm just really confused. There were people who were already in the air when the executive order was signed.
Really quick.
People who've come to this country before, people who have family here, literally like wives and children, and then they couldn't leave the airport.
Right.
How about them? So, have we not already proven, have they not proven that they love this country?
I want to get back to this specific question. I mean, do you think it's a good idea or not? Before people come over, should you say to them, hey, in our country, we don't discriminate on the base of race or sex or sexual orientation? I mean, are you for that? I mean, I know you don't want to admit you're for anything that Trump is for, but what do you think of that?
The application of this executive order is already questionable. We're already seeing people who are discriminated against.
I called you a bigot because your views on Islam, and you say that they should have to leave the country, they shouldn't be here, and all that.
Do you want
That's called bigotry.
You want those terrorists that hate us in our country because they say that
all of them don't hate us. I know that for a fact.
How do you
know?
know?
I have friends who are Muslims.
Ask them about Allah Akbar and see what happens. All right, thank you, Barry. I got to take a break. Waste of time, waste of energy, waste of space, waste of outcome. I'll take some more calls right after this break.
The American people are being disarmed in the war of ideas. They're being disarmed in the information battle space. Initially, New York authorities and Mayor de Blasio denied that it was jihad terror. And this follows a pattern in the West. They deny that jihad terror is jihad terror. And even when it's obviously jihad terror, they still continue to deny it. The problem is not trucks and rental companies. The problem is not guns and it's not knives. The problem is the ideology. And there are no lone wolves in the global jihad. There are all soldiers. And what is the internet but a means of communication? The problem is the jihadic doctrine. He was yelling Allahu Akbar. That was Muhammad's jihadist war cry. His last name...
By the way, if you were watching CNN, it was a little different. He was witness. Suspect was yelling, "God is great," in Arabic. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and his last name was Saifullah, which means sword of Allah. And I'm sure when he was vetted by immigration authorities, they knew that this man was moderate, and they knew that his name meant that. The fact is, Muslim immigration means more Islamic terrorism. It's just that simple. President Trump has tried to impose national security restrictions, and again, the leftist Islamic Alliance has opposed it.
All they want to do is vet. Let's vet them. Dr. Gorka, I hear you.
Yeah, so what was just said is incredibly important. I've worked with the NYPD, I've worked with the pavement pounders in the Bureau. It's full of patriots. But when the commissioner of the NYPD refuses to say what it was that this attacker shouted at the press conference, what is he saying about Americans? Is he saying we're too stupid to understand, or is he continuing the political correctness? When Governor Cuomo, within minutes of the attack, says there is no broader conspiracy, this is a lone attacker. Governor, there is no way on God's earth you
guys
can
raise
know
a great
that
point.
within minutes of an attack.
Yeah, Geraldo, last word.
There's no way he can know that.
Real quick.
Well, I think that is a defeatist notion. The NYPD has the best surveillance I think in the Western world
It was
on various Muslims and Muslim groups.
It was dismantled by CARE and by Mayor de Blasio.
That's
it was
not true. They are still
the counterterrorism program was dismantled.
Active. There's 25,000 Muslims living in.
Last week, a jury convicted a Muslim jihadi in a plot to behead me, an ISIS-inspired attack. There have been numerous attacks on my life by ISIS-inspired jihadis in this country.
All right, hang on one at a time. Geraldo, go ahead.
This terrorist attack is the first time since 9/11 that they've gotten anything like this kind of first success. We are taking prudent actions. When you guys talk about Muslims as being the devil, you overlook the fact that we have a substantial 4%.
Who said that? Why do I have to pat on the back every Muslim that doesn't want to kill me? I expect that.
Of our population,
we're not talking about all Muslims. We're talking about jihadists. Stop conflating them together. Stop broad brushing Muslims all as jihadis.
4% of our population is Muslim American. You're not going to stop someone from self-starting themselves on this ideology. What you have to do now is good police work, good surveillance, pass those sections of the Patriot Act that have lapsed.
They've been dismantled. NYPD had to dismantle their counterterrorism program. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio.
And stereotyping.
The killer, whose name I will not use or ever say, was born an Afghan of Afghan parents who immigrated to the United States. His father published support for the Afghan Taliban, a regime which murders those who don't share its radical views, and they murdered plenty. The father even said he was running for president of Afghanistan. The bottom line is that the only reason the killer was in America in the first place was because we allowed his family to come here. That is a fact, and it's a fact we need to talk about. We have a dysfunctional immigration system which does not permit us to know who we let into our country, and it does not permit us to protect our citizens properly. We have an incompetent administration, and if I'm elected president, that will not change. I will tell you, that will not change over the next 4 years. We have an administration that will not change. But if I get in there, it's going to change, and it's going to change quickly. We're going from totally incompetent to just the opposite, believe me. Thank you. With 50 people dead, and perhaps more ultimately, and dozens more wounded, we cannot afford to talk around issues anymore. We have to address these issues head on. I called for a ban after San Bernardino and was met with great scorn and anger. But now, many years, and I have to say many years, but many are saying that I was right to do so. And although the pause is temporary, we must find out what is going on. We have to do it. it will be lifted, this ban, when and as a nation we're in a position to properly and perfectly screen these people coming into our country. They're pouring in, and we don't know what we're doing. The immigration laws of the United States give the president powers to suspend entry into the country of any class of persons. Now, any class, it really is determined and to be determined by the president for the interests of the United States. And it's as he or she deems appropriate. Hopefully, it's he in this case.
Your thoughts, should Sharia law supersede the U.S. Constitution?
No, but I think the Sharia law is made by God, by Allah, and the Constitution is made by people. So it's not the same.
Do you believe that Sharia law should be above the U.S. Constitution?
Yes.
Yes. Sharia law is completely different than the United States Constitution. As a Muslim, you practice my Islamic law. As a Muslim, United States Constitution, as a citizen, I have to respect the Constitution. Nothing to do with Sharia law. It's a Muslim country, Sharia law is allowed. Other country, no. You have to have a right Constitution.
Should any religious law supersede the U.S. Constitution at any time? Any denomination?
Maybe in the future.
The U.S. Constitution deserve all the people living in U.S. their rights, right? So Sharia law does not contradict with this. Sharia law just protect our dignified. We are like human being, be respectful, to be respectful in the society.
So you think that the U.S. Constitution should be the law of the land in the U.S.?
Also helpful to protect our Sharia.
Should Sharia law be over the U.S. Constitution?
Yes, maybe. Every country have a different policy and different law, but I respect the law in any country I go.
Do you believe that the tenets of Sharia law should be over the U.S. Constitution?
No.
That U.S. Constitution, which is made by people, and the Sharia law is made by Allah. So that is all the way above. That has to be definitely in the land, not for the America, for the whole world, would be above the
So
Sharia
that
law.
should be above the U.S.
Definitely.
Constitution?
Yes.
Obviously, this is what Ben Carson was talking about when he said he couldn't advocate for electing a Muslim president. And this is just a very troubling fact of life in society. I mean, and the fact that the Democrats are attacking Ben Carson over saying this. I mean, this is a Sharia law. There's no gay marriage, for instance. Abortion, as you pointed out, is punishable by death. Blasphemy. You know, no one's talking about rounding up Muslims, certainly not Ben Carson like FDR did during World War II. But this is just a fundamentally Sharia law is
But
at
Howie, expand
odds
on
with
that.
the Bill of Rights.
Howie, I want you to expand on that because fundamentally the Quran and Islam, I'm not talking about radical Islamists, the Quran and Islam are fundamentally at odds with the Constitution. Isn't that the truth?
No, correct.
not the truth.
You know, did you ever think, Sean, that we would come to a point in our lifetimes where the Constitution and the Bill of Rights would be on the table?
No.
It's just mind-boggling, and I don't understand why the Democrats are so down on Carson. You know, they have litmus tests, so-called, for Supreme Court justices. If you're against abortion rights, then they're not going to vote for you, including Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer. Now they have a litmus test for Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision about the First Amendment. So I mean, if Ben Carson wants to make this a litmus test, if you're for Sharia law, he's not going to vote for you. What's the problem? I'm with Ben Carson.
Yeah, and by the way, if I ask you, Mr. Zafar, where are the Catholic and Christian and Protestant and Jewish temples in Muslim countries, and what are the restrictions, or what is the punishment for anyone that speaks out against the very extremely controversial life of Muhammad? What would happen to them in a Muslim country under Sharia, as applied currently in Muslim countries today?
Right. And so what you have clearly and very accurately defined
as the system of government in countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, Afghanistan. There's a reason why within the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community and other Muslims as well, do we continually and consistently condemn them
not
just on like
small minority. You can't even get, as I understand it, in Pakistan, you can't get a Muslim funeral if you're an Ahmadiyya.
The U.S. The United States
Sean, they just had a
the United
major
States
march
constitutes
in
less than
Copenhagen, Denmark. They want to make Denmark a Muslim nation. There was a
but you know where part of this
party.
needs to begin, Sean, is that there's a reformation needed, and the Ahmadiyya Muslims, the Sufis, there are other groups. Just like we had a reformation in the Christian church, there's time for a Muslim reformation, and it's at hand.
David,
and the
they are
and that's why it's very important to remember that.
But here's my point: in the United States, they can create a foundation and begin to spread. It's not going to happen
David,
overnight.
They're not even considered Muslims by the 98%.
I hear you, but it's got to start somewhere,
Sean, that's why
and
it's important
Muslims
to
have
remember.
to solve this problem.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Do you know what that means?
Yeah, I actually lived in the Middle East for 2 years as a child.
That's really good. Now, if you could reply with the proper, like assalamu.
Oh, you see, I had a. Yeah,
Alaikum assalam.
Yeah, not a fan.
Have a good day.
Growing up there as a young girl, I wasn't a big fan of like having to cover myself all the time. The actual rape culture that goes on in the Middle East, and throwing gays off of buildings and such. I wasn't a big fan of that. Being an American over there.
Neither am I, but you don't think Donald Trump is after the same policies?
I don't think he wants to throw gays off of buildings, no.
No, but he's openly against them in radical form.
Open against what?
Gay people, Islamic people, black people, Mexican people. He's all about the hate.
What did he do to gay people?
He's openly slandered a bunch of...
what did he say? I don't know. I would like to know about this. I haven't heard this.
You haven't heard anything about...
I haven't heard him say bad things about gays, no.
Okay. Well, look at stuff from the 1990s.
I don't know if you can even really compare saying a few things to really throwing them off of buildings either.
You're right. You're right. Sticks and stones will not break bones, but words do hurt.
Yeah, I think I'd rather hear a few nasty words than be thrown off a building.
Me too. And that's where we're all the same on a human level.
Don't think it's quite a valid comparison, is my point.
Okay. Well, that's different. Have a good day.
Dr. Follow-up segment tonight, Muslim immigration survey by Chatham House of more than 10,000 Europeans. Kind of shocking. Poll was taken before President Trump's executive order was announced on January 27th, constraining refugees from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Chatham survey asked, do you think all further migration from mainly Muslim countries should be stopped in Europe? 55% say yes. Just 20% say no. 25% didn't answer. Joining us from Washington, Dr. Niall Gardner, director of the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom. So what does that survey tell you, Doctor, and is it a legitimate organization, Chatham?
Well, it's certainly a legitimate organization. This is a very powerful poll. Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, is arguably Britain's most prestigious think tank. So this is a very, very serious survey by a serious institution. It also covers 10,000 people across 10 countries throughout Europe. So it's a very, very big survey. And I think it's one of the most important surveys that we've seen in Europe in recent years with regard to attitudes towards immigration, and also reflecting tremendous fear, anxiety in Europe with regard to the huge influx of refugees that have come into Europe over the last 2 years. So this is a big, big poll. Which does reflect, I think, widespread concern with regard to mass immigration into Europe and also with regard to the refugee crisis.
Now, the low number, that's what surprised me. 55%, I wasn't that surprised because there are a lot of social problems associated with the Muslim migration into Europe. But, 20% say, yeah, we want to continue this. That's probably just the Muslims themselves, right?
I mean, it's a striking figure there, Bill, and there's no doubt about it. I think the wave of Islamist terror attacks that we have seen across Europe, from France to Belgium to Germany in the last couple of years, have had a huge impact. And without a doubt, I think that there's a real sense of foreboding across much of Europe, and a real concern that there are more Islamist terror attacks to come. And so I think that poll really captures that sense of fear. And I think that there are concerns, of course, on both sides of the Atlantic with regard to the broader Islamist threat. And of course, the recent executive order by the White House reflected that as well. And so there are common concerns, common fears on both sides.
But in
of the
America, it's like 50-50 about that order. But in Europe, this is bad news for the Angela Merkel set and the liberal politicians. If this is true and this holds, you're going to see a stream of right-wing politicians seize power in Europe and a bunch of other countries.
Yeah, I think it's ironic that you've seen, for example, Angela Merkel, Francois Hollande, for example, the leaders of Germany and France, condemning President Trump over his executive order, while at home, of course, there is huge concern and fear over the refugee issue and mass immigration. And without a doubt, I think you do have European elites in power who are deeply out of touch with their own populations, and the open borders policy implemented by Angela Merkel.
That's what led to Brexit.
Which led to 1.3 million refugees flowing into Germany. This has had a huge impact across Europe, and I think there's been a widespread rejection of Merkel's open borders approach by most European publics.
All right, Doctor, we appreciate it as always. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell, you have my 5 minutes to ask questions.
Beta. Why do we want these type of men representing us in the Republican Party? I really would like to know. Why? Why? The left is insane, but look who is driving the left. It's not men anymore. When the men were there, they were crazy too, but not as crazy. But an angry woman would take it to the heel. She want blood. She want your soul. She want to chew you up and spit you out. And if the kids gets in the way, they going too. They're going down. The Democrats want control. These feminist, godless, evil women and men of the Democratic Party want control by any means necessary.
Meanwhile, these same people are just fine with communism and Islam, ideologies where mass murder is essential for its existence.
Weaver reporting for Infowars.com. I'm here in Austin, Texas, where Hillary Clinton is scheduled to start her book signing, and you have lots of liberals, mostly women, lined up ready to go and meet Hillary Clinton to get their What Happened books signed. Anyway, okay. But is this private? This is private property.
We don't have anything to do with that event. We're just here with the property owner.
What do you think about Hillary Clinton selling some of our uranium to the Russians?
Fake news.
That's fake news? Really? Do you
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton, as the chairman, approved this deal.
Hillary Clinton as a woman, if she's really for women that haven't been, sexually assaulted and stuff, don't you think she should have divorced Bill?
Have a nice day.
Whoa. Whoa, somebody got triggered here. Items, ma'am.
Scare you? Are you a little snowflake?
Doesn't scare me, but I have boundaries here.
Oh, it's so sad. You're so pathetic.
Yep, dirty looks, hostility. Hello.
I wonder why.
I wonder why. Oh, is it because of my shirt? Is it because of my shirt?
I think it's because you work for that trash organization.
Yeah, because of Infowars.
Because of Infowars?
Which is a... If you want to talk about fake news, let's talk about what you guys do and how you're not real journalists.
Let's talk about CNN, NBC, all of these other mainstream media organizations that have been caught in fake news over and over, time and time again.
Yeah, give me an example.
They were pushing that Trump was lying about having been spied on by the Obama administration.
I'm sorry, I need for you to go because you are upsetting people.
I need for you to go.
We care about our customers. Hey, This is a customer let's event. both go. You need to go or we're going to call other people to come get you out of here. You're being inappropriate and you know you're being inappropriate. Please go.
You guys are really this is tyrannical right here. You don't believe in the First Amendment, do you?
You are being inappropriate. You are upsetting people. You need to go.
Are you upset? Is that why?
You have upset people. You know you did it. You need to go.
But here's
You're being very inappropriate. You
Send
are
the
being
Secret
very
Service here then.
Inappropriate, and you need to go.
Send the Secret Service. Send the police.
Actually, hi. She's upsetting people, and she's causing an issue. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just standing here on a public sidewalk right now in the public. If people are standing here, look, she's making sure people are okay. Now, okay, this is exactly what Donna Brazile was talking about.
It was a cult. I felt like it was a cult. You could not penetrate them.
Cult-like behavior from Hillary Clinton's staff and private security.
This is Hillary Clinton.
Whoa.
I agree.
You suck. Man, I just saw your t-shirt. I don't think we're going to chat.
Do you know about, but do you know what it's referencing?
What is referencing?
Do you know what my shirt is referencing?
Absolutely.
What?
I'm not talking.
Bill Clinton was abusive to women. Hillary Clinton attacked those same women. 4 of them are here tonight. He had to pay an $850,000 fine to one of the women, Paula Jones, who's also here tonight.
Why didn't Hillary Clinton leave Bill after Monica Lewinsky, Juanita Broderick, Kathleen Willey?
I think that's
Nobody's business but theirs. Seriously, that is her business and not yours and not mine. She stood by her husband, and that's it.
So, don't talk to him. Don't talk to him.
So, sir,
why are you asking a group of Hillary people about Bill anyway? No, I know.
Boo!
Did you vote for Hillary?
Hell yes.
What were your reasons?
I say the main reason is because she was smarter than anybody on the planet. Smarter than anybody on the planet. And she should be there.
What do you guys think about some of the allegations of corruption?
There's always allegations against that woman. Poor Miss Hillary, she's for the rest of her natural life, that's what it's going to be, just allegations.
Did you guys read Hillary Clinton's book?
Not yet.
So you don't know what happened?
Good luck. You're not going to get away with this.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump is the one causing the distractions, and we are not going to fall for it anymore.
What happened?
I don't have anything to say to a propaganda machine like you guys. Carry on.
Hillary Clinton does not actually respect women when she's still married to a sexual predator such as Bill Clinton, and many of these women just don't seem to care. They don't seem to want to believe that or hear that message. But these staffers, these cult-like staffers of Hillary Clinton, they are not to stalk me. They are not to put their hands on me. This is Millie Weaver signing off for Infowars.com.
Glenn, a lot to get to. I know I mentioned before the break that you put on that Make America Great Again hat recently. You were trying to say something about the news media's coverage of him, about all the criticism of him. What were you trying to say?
Yeah, that you have become me, circa 2009.
Is that a compliment?
Wait,
is that a compliment?
See it. No, it's not. And you don't see it. None of you are willing to listen to what you're doing, and you're dividing us even more. We've had 2 people threaten the lives of either a congressman's child or the president's child. Where are the people that were so worried about language and the tone on television? You just had George Takei talking about Japanese internment camps. What's next? FEMA camps? Don't you understand what you're doing? You're driving people into the arms of Donald Trump. You're driving them into it.
Exactly. So that's what I'm trying to ask about. So when we
they
point out that he's lying every day, it drives people into his arms. What is the right answer then? If we don't point out the lies, then what?
Well, first of all, you have to recognize the mistakes of the past. I can't take this border issue because I wasn't allowed into anybody's circle after my audience raised $3 million, and we risked everything to go down to the border. And we brought churches together. We actually fed the homeless. I was mocked for bringing them soccer balls, which people now say is a good thing because at least they have soccer balls at summer camp. And on the other side, no one in the media would even listen. No one would listen when I said,
Glenn, that's not true. There was
I
lots of
have
coverage of it in
DHS people
2014. I remember you going to the border in 2014. Obama's policy might have been ugly. It's a lot worse now.
Was there? Was
of course
there
not.
this
There
kind
weren't
of
as many as
coverage
kids.
when you had?
There weren't as many
Of
kids
course-
in jail.
Oh, stop it!
Stop what?
Stop
There were
it.
not as many
Stop
kids
it.
in jail.
You're telling me, so it's the number. So what's the number, Brian, that we care about putting kids in cages? What's the number that we start caring about when we're separating
care,
family,
and the
when
more
we're
there are,
separating
the more
children?
we care.
What's the number?
The worse
okay.
it gets, the more coverage there should be. Do you disagree with that? The worse
I'm sorry,
it gets,
but
the
you
more
know
coverage
it.
there should be.
No, Brian, when we're doing things to children and breaking them up, no, I don't think there's a problem with covering if it's 10 kids. It should be covered. No one wanted to see it.
And when there's
by
thousands,
the way, that time...
there was a lot of
No,
coverage
when
in
there's a different
2014.
president.
But I respect that there's more
No,
now.
look,
And-
when... Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
This is why people who don't necessarily even support Donald Trump are saying, you know what? I've baked in the lies. I know. I got it. But the journalists now are like saying, well, two can play that game. Neither one of you are self-aware enough to know that there is justice and mercy. One's arguing justice, one's arguing mercy, or they say they are, but they're not. All they're doing is playing politics, and the American people are tired of it. Who is talking about an actual solution on this? Who's actually done something? Who's actually consistent and cared when it was a Democrat in office and cared when it's a Republican in office? You know, those people exist around the country, and they're watching you two, the media and Donald Trump, playing this little game back and forth, and they're sick of it. They don't want to hear about it from either side.
I want the critique because I invited you on. I'm self-aware enough to know that we need to talk about this because I know it's a problem. The mainstream media is having a very hard time. The mainstream media is having a very hard time reaching Trump's base. That's a fact. We see that in all the polling.
Yeah, well, then here's the deal. Brian, you all have my phone number. I've reached out to all of you in the past and said, let's have a conversation not on the air. You really want to understand? You want to hear the other side?
Why can't our viewers?
Then let's have a conversation where
why can't you
everybody's
tell
not
our
interested.
viewers right now?
Because it's all about ratings. Because this is all about ratings. This isn't about ratings. This is about saving our country, bringing us together. Stop dividing us. I mean, I can't.
So to be clear, you think that I'm dividing the country?
To?
You think I'm dividing the country for ratings by booking you?
Brian, stop. Look what you're doing. When did this become about you? This is about the media and the administration. That's what you guys want to make it into.
If it was about me, I would do like a 10-minute commentary the way you used to. If it was about me, I'd get out a blackboard the way you used to.
Okay. Well, then maybe you should.
I mean, the point is, what you mean making it about me? I don't see how I've made it about me. I want to know
It's
how.
not about it. You just said, never mind. Look, Brian, if you want to have a conversation, the media really wants to know, great, we can have that conversation. But every time I've approached, everybody always says yes. But as soon as it gets tough or uncomfortable, nobody's interested. Nobody's interested in looking at themselves and saying, what did I do? I know what I've done. I know what I've done. I've tried to make amends, and I'm trying to...
And we've talked about that before. I completely agree with you. And we all do need to be more self-reflective. I do have to ask you, there's this new headline on the Daily Beast saying that your company's in trouble, that you were trying to find a buyer. Is this related to the point about people not talking to each other? That if you want to create that media company, there's not interest? What's going on with that?
Wow. Brian, thanks a lot. I think that's the most ridiculous question I've ever heard. I'm sitting here ready to talk to you about the detaining of children and parents and trying to break families apart, something that has been happening with Janet Reno. That's why it went to the Supreme Court in the first place. With Janet Reno, it's been happening. We want to stop it, and you want to play those games? Have a nice day.
Tonight, we know the President of the United States has no facts. Facts. no facts to back up his startling allegation that the former president of the United States, President Obama, wiretapped him in Trump Tower during the campaign. Keeping him honest, we know this tonight because bipartisan members of the Senate Intelligence Committee say they've seen no evidence that President Obama ordered Donald Trump's phones tapped during the campaign. We know this because House Speaker Paul Ryan also says he's seen no evidence. Now, remember, the president asked Congress to investigate, and the House and Senate Intelligence Committees have been doing just that for the last dozen days. We know the president has no facts to back up his early morning Saturday tweet storm because in today's White House briefing, Press Secretary Sean Spicer read a long list of media reports that he seemed to believe back up the president's claims. Widely mentioned New York Times reporter of the night, Matthew Rosenberg. Matthew, this reminds me of the scene in Annie Hall where two people are talking about Marshall McLuhan's work, and Woody Allen gets annoyed and says, you know what, I just happen to have Marshall McLuhan right here. So we're very glad we happen to have the reporter who wrote the story that is being quoted now by Sean Spicer. I want to get your reaction to what we just heard. What do you make of the White House citing your article as part of the evidence?
I mean, it's getting bizarre at this point because we've said it very clearly, and I said on your show, that that's not what the story said. Anybody can read the story and see that's not what it said. And so there's this bizarre circular thing happening where the president cites a theory that he was wiretapped, which developed on the kind of fringe right-wing media. And then after his tweet storm, InfoWars then started saying, well, look, it was the New York Times that reported it, citing our story, misreading our story. And now, a few weeks later, the White House and the president are citing InfoWars. So they've got one kind of bizarre right-wing fringe theory to defend another bizarre right-wing fringe theory, both of which there's no evidence to support.
And just to be clear here, there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's absolutely nothing whatsoever in your reporting in the New York Times that indicates President Obama wiretapped or ordered wiretapping of then candidate Trump.
Here's Anderson Cooper and writer Matthew Rosenberg leaving out pertinent info and relying on you not reading the actual article in order to further their agenda. Even though it should be so obvious if you just read the article, they realize that so few people actually go ahead and read it that they went ahead and changed the title of the article so that it no longer matches what Donald Trump said. They neglect to mention the fact that right at the beginning of the article, they talk about a Trump campaign chairman having his communications swept up in the search. This article, which relies on words like possible, associates, and senior officials, screams of bad writing. As a writer, I can tell you that these are words you use when asserting a point without proper evidence. There's supposed to be that voice inside your head that says, do I have facts here, or am I just pushing a bullshit narrative? For example, I could publish a story that says, YouTuber Andrew Says is exploring possibilities about joining the office of the Prime Minister of Canada, associates, and officials claim, which could mean I'm joining the office of the PM, but of course it actually means nothing at all.
All you need to do is... Feels like I'm wearing nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Stupid sexy Flanders.
But what if another publication picks it up? Let's say somebody like Washington Post? They could write a title that says, YouTuber Andrew Says could be working with the Prime Minister, report states, which of course also means nothing. They don't care about illegal leaks for Mike Flynn, but they do care about them for Podesta and Hillary Clinton emails. They don't care about meaningless and leading assertions, but they can't stand Trump speaking in a general sense about the Obama administration. It wasn't Obama, you can't say that. It was just a bunch of the agencies working under him. They neglect to mention the fact that Mike Flynn being ID'd or unmasked from the communications is illegal, as he was a private citizen at the time. But we all know they jumped to illegal leaks and Russian hacks regarding the Podesta emails. They don't mention that these agencies knew about this, but somehow President Obama did not. Of course there isn't hard evidence saying that Obama ordered a wiretapping. That would be foolish, and Obama is not that stupid. But Representative Devin Nunes did come out last week, and he had this to say. I'll let Ben Shapiro explain it because he's smarter and more popular than I am.
Here's what Devin Nunes said yesterday. We're going to go through this in detail because I think it is important to debunk things that are not true. I still care about things like truth, even if they don't benefit my side, quote unquote. Okay, here is Devin Nunes. He starts off by saying, this is his big announcement that was supposedly earth-shattering yesterday. He is the ranking Republican on the House Intelligence Committee, and he had just gone to the White House and met with Trump on this.
I was concerned that other surveillance activities were used against President Trump and his associates. So first, I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. Third, I have confirmed that additional names of Trump transition team members were unmasked. And fourth and finally, I want to be clear, none of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or of the Trump team.
Okay, so here's the important part. So we'll get to the wiretapping part, the leaks part in a second, because Nunes is right on the leaks. That is the most important part of what is happening in all of this. I agree with that, because again, there is no hard information that one, Obama directed wiretapping at Trump, or two, that Trump is in the pocket of the Russians. But what we do know with 100% certitude is that Obama intelligence officials were leaking information to the press. That is a crime, okay? And those people need to be tracked down and prosecuted, because regardless of how they got the information on Mike Flynn being on the phone with Sergei Kislyak or whatever his name is, they were not supposed to release that. That is illegal. So the last part of what he's saying is not the controversial part. It's the first part. What did he say? Here is what he exactly said again. The intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Incidentally. Okay, so for all the people claiming that this vindicates Trump, no, incidentally means the drug deal I was talking about before. Incidentally means that they were listening to the Russians and some Trump people were on the other end of the line. That is not the same thing as what Trump claimed, and to pretend that it is to be dishonest. Okay, and then it is clarified. Okay, a reporter says, were these communications picked up at Trump Tower?
Was any of these communications landing picked up at Trump Tower?
We don't know that yet. That's why we need to get the information.
Okay, and then he is asked specifically, was Trump targeted, or was this just incidental collection of information? Was he just on the other line?
Was the president also part of that incidental collection, his communications?
Yes.
They were?
Yes.
So wait, excuse me, let me just clarify. The President of the United States' personal communications were intercepted as an incidental.
No, I think we have to, I think what we have to, when we talk about intelligence products here, we got to be very careful. From what I know right now, it looks like incidental collection.
Stop it there.
We don't know.
Incidental collection. Okay, clip 4. Are you concerned that the surveillance was done illegally? Was there anything illegal here? Here's Nunes.
Are you concerned that any of the surveillance was done illegally, or it was incidental but a legal?
That's a great. Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I believe it was all done legally.
Stop it there. Again, that's not what Trump is claiming. Trump is claiming that he was illegally surveilled. That's what he says. Okay, so again, is this great stuff? No, but are you claiming the intelligence community is doing things that they're not doing? If Trump is doing that, that's bad. It's just mind-boggling to me that people are willing to overlook basic truth because they want a political agenda to win here. Okay, I hate this. Trump could have easily made the case that the leaks that are coming out of the Obama apparatus are the problem. That was the case that Mark Levin made.
We want to give you a case here this morning to lay out what you know about it, and the evidence you have for the potential executive overreach of the Obama administration.
Well, pleasure to be here. The evidence is overwhelming. This is not about President Trump's tweeting. This is about the Obama administration's spying. And the question isn't whether it's spied. We know they went to the FISA court twice. The question is, who did they spy on? The extent of the spying. That is, the Trump campaign, the Trump transition, Trump surrogates. And I want to walk you through this, the American people. Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1. This is all public. Head Street. 2 separate sources with links to the counterintelligence community have confirmed that the FBI sought and was granted a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court. This is spying. In October, giving counterintelligence permission to examine the activity of, quote, U.S. persons in Donald Trump's campaign with ties to Russia. Let me go on. This isn't me. They say the first FISA request, sources say, named Trump, was denied back in June, denied by the court. But the second was drawn more narrowly and was granted in October after evidence was presented of a server possibly related to the Trump campaign and its alleged links to 2 banks. Now, sources suggest that a FISA warrant was granted to look at the full content of emails and other related documents that may concern U.S. persons. Now, I know people are hung up with Trump's word wiretapping. Well, how'd they get access to this server information? Does it really matter if it was wiretapping, electronic surveillance, or whatever it was? Exhibit 2, The Guardian, a well-known right-wing British paper. Here it is. Quote, The Guardian has learned the FBI applied for a warrant from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court over the summer in order to monitor 4 members of the Trump team suspected of irregular contacts with Russian officials. Keep in mind, this is during a presidential election. The sitting president, the incumbent party, is now investigating the presidential candidate of the Republican Party and his campaign to some extent. The FISA court turned down the application asking FBI counterintelligence investigators to narrow its focus. According to one report, the FBI was finally granted a warrant in October. Exhibit 3, McClatchy, another well-known right-wing newspaper. Here they have the agencies. Headline, FBI, 5 other agencies, 5 other Obama administration agencies probe possible covert Kremlin aid to Trump. The FBI and 5 other law enforcement intelligence agencies have collaborated for months in an investigation into Russian attempts to influence the November election, including whether money from Kremlin covertly aided presidential-elect Donald Trump. 2 people familiar with the matter said the agencies involved in the inquiry are the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Justice Department, the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and representatives of the Director of the National Intelligence. Are you telling me Barack Obama didn't know what was going on in 6 agencies?
As you go on, how are you? Okay, keep going.
I'm not done. I need to make the case because the media seems to be confused about their own reporting. New York Times, another well-known liberal outlet, intercepted Russian communications, part of inquiry into Trump associates, January 19. The FBI is leading the investigations, aided by the NSA, the CIA, Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The investigators have accelerated their efforts in recent weeks, but have found no conclusive evidence of wrongdoing. Listen to this. One official said intelligence reports based on some of the wiretap communications have been provided to the White House. This is the New York Times,
another right-wing outlet.
4.
Another right-wing outlet.
Let's continue. New York Times again. NSA gets more latitude to share intercepted communications. In the final days of the Obama administration, the administration has expanded the power of the NSA to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intelligence agencies before applying privacy protections. Now, why would they do this on the way out the door? Well, March 1, Exhibit 6, Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. In the Obama administration's last days, listen to this, some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election and about possible contacts between associates of President-elect Trump and Russians across the government. I'm not done. Exhibit 7, New York Times. Flynn is said to have talked to Russians about sanctions Trump took office. Well, where'd they get this information? Well, Mark, you know, the FISA court, they're always monitoring the Russian ambassador. And so how do we know that? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But there's an awful lot of other activity.
Sure.
Here we have Washington Post. One more. Washington Post, March 2nd. U.S. investigators have examined contacts Attorney General Sessions had with Russian officials during the time he was advising Donald Trump's campaign. The focus of the U.S. counterintelligence investigation has been on communication between Trump campaign officials and Russia. Listen to this. The inquiry involving Sessions is examining his contacts while serving as Trump's foreign policy advisor in the spring and summer of 2016. This has been going on for a year.
Well, Mark,
now,
as you do on your radio program, you lay out a devastating case based on public documents, as you point out, and not right-wing sources, but mainstream left-stream sources.
Because you troll women, that's why.
All kinds of things get through. Did I troll women?
Can I just ask a question?
You seem to be accusing me. You're accusing me of things that I never did. I'm responsible for what I do. I'm much more interested, by the way, in your question about Daddy and about Daddy Donald Trump. I called him that because I think it sort of annoys everybody, but also because it reflected the role that Donald Trump was playing in culture and in society at the time. He was one of those people that kind of slightly made you cringe sometimes, made you a little embarrassed sometimes, but was basically right, basically had your interests at heart. heart. And if you stuck by him, you knew he was going to look after you in the end. I found that a lot of female voters who you might not have imagined would vote for Trump because of perhaps his locker room talk or whatever were voting for him anyway, and they loved him. Why? Because he was this strong, masculine figure who projected strength and maybe a little machismo versus the previous president who was, limp-wristed and useless and never inspired. There were no women fainting in the aisles or lightheaded on the chaise longue for Obama towards the end. But there were for Trump, and I found it fascinating. And so anyway, I called him daddy, and it annoyed the left and the right, which is exactly where I live. If both sides are upset with me, that's what I want. I want both the conservatives and liberals mad with me.
But they call themselves the resistance. You ever see these signs? Resist, resist. I love these guys. Look at these guys. Blacks for Trump. I love you. I love you. I love you. By the way, now that you bring it up, black home ownership just hit the highest level it's ever been in the history of our country. Congratulations. Oh, these resistors resist. Hillary resisted, and you know what happened? She lost the election in a landslide. But you know what they're really resisting? They're resisting the will of the American people. That's what they're resisting. Look, it's being proven we have a rigged system. Doesn't happen so easy. But this system, going to be a lot of changes. This is a rigged system. This is a sick system from the inside. And, there's no country like our country, but we have a lot of sickness in some of our institutions. And we're working very hard. We've got a lot of them straightened out, but we really do. We have a rigged system in this country, and we have to change it. Terrible. Terrible. They're resisting progress. They're resisting change because the only thing they really care about is protecting what they've been able to do, which is really control the country and not to your benefit. By the way, wages starting to go up. First time in 20 years starting to go up. That's all going to happen. That's all going to happen. That's all going to happen. That's just a part of what's going on. But I'm going to do something better than that. We're going to have choice. Now, we have choice in education now. We're starting that, right? And I thought of it the other day. We're going to have choice in jobs so that you don't have one job and hang on even though you don't like it. You're going to have choice where you can take 5 jobs, 6 jobs, 7 jobs, pick the one you like at the most money. That's what's starting to happen because the jobs are coming in. That's what's starting to happen.
Information that turned out to be so false and fake out. I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace. That information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. As far as BuzzFeed, which is a failing pile of garbage, writing it, I think they're going to suffer the consequences. They already are. And as far as CNN going out of their way to build it up, and by the way, we just found out I was coming down. Michael Cohen, Michael Cohen is a very talented lawyer. He's a good lawyer in my firm. It was just reported that it wasn't this Michael Cohen they were talking about. So all night long, it's Michael Cohen. I said, I want to see your passport. He brings his passport to my office. I say, hey, wait a minute. He didn't leave the country. He wasn't out of the country. They had Michael Cohen of the Trump Organization was in Prague. It turned out to be a different Michael Cohen. It's a disgrace what took place. It's a disgrace. And I think they ought to apologize to start with, Michael Cohen.
Since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state, Mr. President-elect,
go ahead.
can you state categorically,
She's asking a question. Don't
Mr.
be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
You're attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically that nobody... No, Mr. President-elect, that's not appropriate.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We have exclusive new reporting on a story that has turned Washington upside down and caused more intrigue than anything in the city I've seen in 25 years. As, of course, you've heard, independent counsel Robert Mueller's investigation has zeroed in on its first targets. Today, former Donald Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort and his business associate Rick Gates were both indicted on charges of money laundering, tax fraud, and failure to report lobbying arrangements. Now, the indictment, among other things, offers tantalizing details about how foreign lobbying actually works at the highest levels in Washington, how Manafort allegedly used laundered offshore cash to buy Range Rovers, expand his wardrobe, somehow spend $655,000 on landscaping for his house in the Hamptons. Manafort's indictment comes as, honestly, no surprise to anyone who's been in Washington for a while and has watched him operate, though, of course, the legal system will make the final call on that. It's pretty clear, though, that Paul Manafort is just the first in a series of people in D.C. who are suddenly in deep, deep trouble. Who's next? Well, reading between the lines of the indictment and talking to a number of our own sources, we think we've got a pretty good idea of that. Keep in mind that today's indictment never mentions Donald Trump's presidential campaign or the 2016 election. It only mentions Russia in passing, even though Russian meddling was the pretext for this investigation in the first place. Instead, the indictment catalogs Manafort's efforts to lobby on behalf of pro-Russia groups in Ukraine. The indictment goes into great detail on the relationship between Manafort and two mysterious groups described in the document as Company A and Company B. Those companies, we can report tonight, are Mercury LLC, that's led by former Republican Congressman Vin Weber, and the Podesta Group, founded by Tony Podesta and his brother John, whom you'll remember as Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. None of this will come as a shock to viewers of this show. Last Tuesday, we told you that the Mueller investigation is no longer primarily a search for Russian collusion in the 2016 race. It is now a much far-reaching inquiry into corrupt lobbying practices across D.C., one that is very likely to ensnare figures close to Hillary Clinton. In press accounts, Mueller's investigation is still framed as a hunt for collusion between Donald Trump's presidential campaign and the government of Russia. Our source says investigators are, in fact, very interested in Manafort's behavior while he ran the Trump campaign, but otherwise that description is mostly bogus. The investigation has broadened now to determine which people and which organizations in Washington have spent years working secretly as de facto operatives on behalf of Russian government and business interests. The Podesta Group is chief among these. Quote, they are more focused on facilitators of Russian influence in this country, says our source, than they are on election collusion. The Podesta Group, he says, quote, is in their crosshairs. Well, that segment, which ran last week, provoked a snarling legal threat from Tony Podesta today, designed to shut us up. That's not going to happen, obviously, but we'll tell you a lot more about it in just a minute. Last week, we explained how Paul Manafort used a sham group called the European Center for a Modern Ukraine to lobby on behalf of pro-Russian forces in Ukraine. Those forces sought a number of changes to American policy, changes to the Republican platform, for example. Some of the changes are obviously contrary to America's interests and values. Among them, they wanted the U.S. government to support the imprisonment of one of the Ukraine president's political opponents. Shady does not begin to describe this operation. Even some of Tony Podesta's own employees thought the whole thing was disgusting. Well, today's indictment confirms our reporting on this. It describes the Center for Modern Ukraine as a fake organization, merely, quote, a mouthpiece for the Ukrainian president, Yanukovych. The indictment also confirms that the lobbying groups Manafort hired in Washington, including Tony Podesta's, knew perfectly well that the Center for the Modern Ukraine was fake when they signed on to represent it. According to the feds, Podesta's company was told explicitly they would be lobbying on behalf of the Ukrainian president.
In November 2012, the indictment says, Manafort's business partner explicitly requested reports on lobbying activity by both those companies so that he could brief the president of Ukraine, Yanukovych, on what they were doing. It couldn't get dirtier. But despite apparently knowing they were acting as foreign agents, agents of a foreign government, the Podesta Group never registered as foreign agents. Failure to do that is against the law. In April 2012, the Podesta Group filed documents with Congress relating to its work with the Center for a Modern Ukraine. At the time, they falsely claimed that group was just a foreign NGO. The Podesta Group's filing contained a declaration by the Center for a Modern Ukraine that, quote, none of the activities of the center are directly or indirectly supervised, directed, controlled, financed, or subsidized in whole or in part by a government of a foreign country or a foreign political party. That declaration, false, was endorsed as true by Kimberly Fritz, now the CEO of the Podesta Group and a former Jeb Bush staffer. All apparently a lie. Moreover, according to today's indictment, the Podesta Group must have known it was a lie when they signed that document. Under the law, the firm should have immediately registered with the government, the U.S. government, under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Instead, the Podesta Group waited until spring 2017, this year, to do that, and then somehow applied the status retroactively. By that point, the Center for a Modern Ukraine had effectively been out of business for 3 years. It was a little late. Interestingly, the Podesta Group filed those late papers just weeks after media outlets began reporting that law enforcement was investigating Manafort's offshore bank accounts. Connection? But wait, why would Ukrainian interests hire Tony Podesta in the first place? Well, according to a former Podesta employee we spoke to over this weekend, even foreign officials in distant lands understood that Tony Podesta's brother was John Podesta, a key Clinton confidant. It was widely known the two brothers had dinner together every Sunday night. Quote, that's not something we hid from clients of the firm. They loved hearing that. Even a native Russian speaker could grasp the point of all of this. The Podesta Group was hired by Paul Manafort on behalf of foreign clients because the company was perceived to have a direct line to powerful politicians. John Podesta was Hillary's campaign chairman. Tony Podesta had been friends with Bill Clinton since the midterm elections of 1970. Influence peddling 101. How central were the Podesta's political connections to their profit model? Consider this. The firm's billing dropped dramatically almost immediately after Hillary Clinton lost the race for president. That tells you a lot. Mueller's investigators apparently have figured this out. Today, Tony Podesta resigned as head of his company. His excuse? Us. That's right, he blamed us. In his parting statement, Podesta said this, quote, it is impossible to run a public affairs firm while you're under attack by Fox News and the right-wing media. Well, Podesta isn't just complaining about us, though. He's threatening us. This afternoon, we got a letter from Jeff Garanther. He's a lawyer with Venable LLP, a big law firm here in D.C. The letter demands that this show, quote, immediately cease and desist disseminating false and misleading reports about Mr. Podesta and the Podesta Group. It demands we retract and delete all our prior reporting on the Podesta Group and warns that if we don't do this, quote, Mr. Podesta may pursue legal action, including for damages, in order to fully protect his rights. The letter doesn't stop there, though. It also warns us that we will face legal action under the Copyright Act merely for quoting from this letter publicly, as we just did. The most amusing line, though, is this one. Quote, Paul Manafort did not work with the Podesta Group in its representation of the European Center for a Modern Ukraine. That's what the lawyer's letters told us. Apparently that lawyer hasn't read the Manafort indictment yet. In paragraph 22 of that indictment, we read this, quote, at the direction of Manafort and Gates, companies A and B engaged in extensive lobbying on Ukraine. The indictment also says that the Podesta Group and Mercury were selected personally by Paul Manafort to lobby on behalf of Ukrainian interests. So if John Podesta's legal team has a complaint, it's not with us, it's with the Department of Justice and the Mueller investigation. But maybe we're being too literal about this, probably so. Podesta's lawyer wasn't trying to inform us of anything, but to threaten us, to shut down our reporting on his client. One lawyer we talked to earlier today said the Podesta people have used this tactic with others before. It's common. It's an effort to use fear to control press coverage. We're not intimidated. We have ample evidence from Mueller's indictment and from a number of confidential sources to paint a pretty clear picture of exactly what the Podesta Group was doing for years here in Washington. We'll let the facts speak for themselves. And we're confident the Mueller investigation will be revealing a lot more about Tony Podesta's lobbying practices in the near future. In the meantime, if you're looking for a summary of all of this, here's the one-sentence cliff note to the whole affair. The chairman of one major presidential campaign colluded with the brother of the chairman of the other major presidential campaign to enrich themselves by secretly advancing the interests of a foreign adversary. That happened. That's the swamp they told you needed to be drained.
In my lifetime, I have seen America, Europe, Australia, and Canada rapidly transformed by mass immigration and changed for the worst. It is unprecedented. We are the only people invaded and expected to welcome our replacements.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. It's not going to stop, nor should we want it to stop. It's one of the things I think we can be most proud of. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
Yes, replacements, because European people are the world's minority. The majority of the planet isn't us. If you open the borders, it's simple math. We are the only people expected to endure hostility, terrorism, and takeover without a fight. Then tell Jews to open their hearts to Palestinians, and the Sunnis to the Shiites, or the Tutsis to the Hutus, or the Tamil Tigers and the Sinhalese. The most natural impulse on the face of the earth is survival and fighting for your people. Only white people are expected to be above it. I like seeing the world's true diversity, with each nation living their culture to the fullest in their homeland. It's easy for me to love and accept those people. But it's a different matter when I am in a European country watching millions of non-Europeans storming the gates. It's only natural to feel angry and closed off. If someone invades your house, do you kick back on the couch and say, "Hey, help yourself, beer's in the fridge. My wife's up in the bedroom if you want to go say hi"? Look, I'm sure there must be some nice non-Europeans crossing our borders, but I stopped finding them nice when it's 30 million of them and I am now a minority playing with my kids in the park, feeling like I'm in a foreign country. No other people would accept this. There have always been a small number of non-Europeans and European nations. When small in number, things go on as usual without problems. I'm perfectly fine with this, but I am not fine with the planned replacement of European people in their nations. I'm not fine with my kids growing up as a minority being told they are bad because they are white. When multiculturalism and diversity is shoved in your face 24/7 with no pocket untouched, you can get a little hostile. It stops being, "Hey, look, another culture or race," into, "Oh, great, them." That is why the gods divided us into separate nations. It's easier to love when everyone has their space to go home to. So whereas insane lefties and anti-whites think my conclusion is mass murder, in reality my conclusion is for people to stay home. Before you tell European Americans to go back to Europe, 1, I already made that video, and 2, so you do agree people should go home or stay home. Well, European Americans are in their other home. Pygmies didn't build America. But if you want to play that game of who owns America, though, then it must be played with Asia, the Middle East, and Africa too. Once you start that game, the entire planet will be in upheaval. While lefties accuse me of instigating violence, it is they who do this by forcing polar opposite groups to live together in the same space, pretending everything is okay when bombs are going off and bodies are on the pavement. It is they who do this by blaming white people for everything and actually encouraging violence against these Nazis. Forcing opposite people together, hoping they will blend out all differences, or threatening them to get in line or else, does not work. It only makes people cling to their own kind even harder. I want peace. To achieve it, you must have a homogeneous, like-minded population. That's why the most peaceful countries in the world are homogeneous and mostly European, by the way. And we had the most peaceful countries before the gates were opened and multiculturalism was shoved down our throat. Multiculturalism always fails. I understand that when differences are too great, it takes separation. Separation doesn't mean mass murder or war. It means resolution. People in America think multiculturalism works just because immigrants from all over the world shop at Home Depot or eat at the Olive Garden. It's very fake. It's not like on TV. Each group sticks to their own. There is no interaction outside of buying stuff in the store. We may all live in the same town, but we don't actually live as a cohesive group at all. I've experienced it and it sucks. It doesn't make people closer to others. It actually makes them closer to their own. Plenty of non-Europeans don't want to live with white people. So does that mean they're advocating for violence against white people? Does that mean they want white genocide? Anti-whites are the biggest liars. They need you to think that I am some genocidal monster when it is actually them pushing a genocidal agenda, replacing white people in white nations. I am just pointing that out.